This time will be different. New routine, new mindset, new beginning. You tell yourself, from now on, I'll stay consistent. And for a few days, you actually believe it. You wake up early. You make plans. You start imagining the version of yourself you could become. More disciplined, more focused, more successful. But then something strange happens. The excitement disappears. The motivation fades. And slowly, you return to the same habits you promised yourself you'd escape. The gym becomes empty again. The notebook stops getting filled. The goals become screenshots in your phone instead of actions in your life. And eventually, you start asking yourself a dangerous question. What if I'm just not capable of changing? But according to psychology, that's usually not the real problem. Because most people who constantly quit are not lazy. They're trapped inside a cycle their brain secretly learned years ago. And once you understand that cycle, you start seeing your entire life differently. The truth is, human beings are addicted to emotional intensity, not progress. That's why people love the feeling of starting over. The first day feels cinematic. Everything feels possible. Your brain floods with dopamine because you're imagining a new identity, a new future, a new version of yourself. But here's what nobody tells you. Your brain gets rewarded for planning change, almost the same way it gets rewarded for actually changing. That's why buying a new journal feels productive. That's why watching motivational videos feels productive. That's why creating the perfect life plan feels productive. Your brain confuses preparation with progress. And eventually, you become addicted to beginning, not finishing. Psychologists sometimes call this the intention-action gap. The painful space between who you want to become and what you repeatedly do. And if you've ever restarted your life every Monday, you know exactly what that feels like. At first, you think the problem is discipline. Then after enough failed restarts, it becomes identity. You stop saying, I failed, and start saying, I am a failure. That shift changes everything. Because once inconsistency becomes part of your identity, your brain starts protecting it. Without realizing it, you begin expecting yourself to quit. You almost feel more comfortable restarting than continuing. Because continuing is uncomfortable. Continuing is repetitive. Continuing forces you to face something most people secretly hate: boredom. And this is where modern life becomes dangerous. Because your brain has been trained to crave stimulation constantly. Fast videos, fast dopamine, fast entertainment, fast emotional rewards. But real transformation is painfully slow. And your brain interprets slow progress as failure. That's why people quit after a week at the gym. Not because nothing is happening, but because nothing dramatic is happening. No movie moment, no instant transformation, just repetition. And repetition doesn't feel exciting. It feels invisible. But psychology shows something fascinating. The people who succeed long-term are usually not the most motivated people. They're the people who stopped needing excitement to continue. They built systems stronger than emotion. Because motivation is emotional, discipline is neurological. One disappears with mood, the other survives mood. That's why some people still work when they feel tired. Still study when they feel distracted. Still continue when life feels emotionally heavy. Not because they enjoy the process every day, but because their identity changed. They stopped asking, "Do I feel motivated?" and started asking, What does the version of me I want to become do next? That single shift changes behavior dramatically. There's a story psychologists often observe in high performers. At the beginning, they're usually not extraordinary. They don't wake up every morning feeling inspired. In fact, many of them hate parts of the process. Athletes hate training sometimes. Writers hate writing sometimes. Entrepreneurs hate working sometimes. But they understand something average people don't. Feelings are temporary. Systems are powerful. And your future is built more by repeated ordinary actions than rare moments of intensity. But most people never learn this. Instead, they create impossible routines overnight. Tomorrow I'll wake up at 5 a.m. Work out every day. Read 2 books a week. Quit social media. Meditate. Fix my sleep. Completely transform my life. And for 3 days, it works. Because adrenaline is carrying them. But eventually, the brain pushes back. The routine becomes exhausting. The pressure becomes heavy. And suddenly even simple tasks feel emotionally overwhelming. So they quit. Again. Not because they're weak. Because their brain experienced the entire routine as a threat. Human beings naturally resist massive identity changes. Your brain wants familiarity, even when familiarity is destroying your life. That's why people stay stuck in habits they hate. Not because they enjoy suffering, but because predictable suffering feels safer than unfamiliar growth. And honestly, that realization changes how you see yourself. Because maybe you were never incapable. Maybe your system was simply unsustainable. There's another psychological reason people quit that almost nobody talks about. Perfectionism. A lot of people think perfectionism means having high standards. But often, perfectionism is fear disguised as ambition. Because if you can't do something perfectly, your brain convinces you not to do it consistently at all. One missed workout suddenly becomes, I ruined everything. One bad day becomes, I'm back to zero. And this creates the most destructive mindset possible. All or nothing thinking. But real consistency doesn't look dramatic. It looks almost boring. A 20-minute workout. Reading 5 pages. Writing 1 paragraph. Going for a walk instead of staying in bed. Tiny actions repeated long enough begin reshaping identity. And identity is everything. Because the moment your brain starts seeing you as someone who shows up, consistency becomes easier. Not perfect. Just easier. And strangely enough, the people who transform their lives are usually not obsessed with motivation anymore. They become obsessed with reducing resistance. Making habits simpler. Making routines sustainable. Making progress realistic. Because they understand something powerful. You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems. And systems are built through repetition, not intensity. This is why some people spend years consuming motivation, but never actually change. They're emotionally inspired, but behaviorally unchanged. And deep down, that becomes painful. Because eventually you realize, you don't need more advice. You need evidence that you can trust yourself again. That's the real reason consistency matters. Not productivity. Self-trust. Every time you keep a promise to yourself, your identity strengthens. Every time you abandon yourself, your brain remembers that too. So the next time you feel the urge to completely restart your life overnight, pause. Maybe your life does not need another dramatic beginning. Maybe it needs smaller promises. Promises you can actually keep. Because real transformation rarely looks impressive in the beginning. It looks repetitive, quiet, invisible. But slowly, those invisible actions begin changing how you see yourself. And once your identity changes, your behavior finally follows. So no, you are probably not incapable of success. You are not broken. You are not doomed to quit forever. You may have simply spent years chasing motivation, instead of building a life that can survive without it. And honestly, that changes everything.